Hi everyone, and welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I really didn't think that I was going to do an episode this week, but Inauguration Day was such a shit show that I felt like there was absolutely some room for some discussion. Today, we're diving into a series of executive actions announced and signed by Donald Trump on Monday the 20th. This is just breakdowns of the ones that I found to be the most egregious, but according to the Washington Post, he signed 26 of them on Inauguration Day, which is the most of any president on their first day. Before we get into it, I would be remiss to not talk about Elon Musk's Nazi salute. It was alarming at the very least, but to me, it was downright appalling. Conservative media jumped to his defense, saying he was autistic and accidentally messed up, but my issue with that is that he did it not once, but twice. Others defending it called it a Roman salute. This is incredibly misleading to me because when somebody says Roman salute, that makes you think that it's going back to ancient times. That, in fact, is from the era of Mussolini, which would still make it a fascist salute. My response to the people like Ted Cruz and Chaya Raichik of Libs of TikTok defending the behavior is to go to your job or get on the internet, get on the Senate floor, go to your office, and greet your friends like that. Do the Roman salute. See how it ends for you. Nobody's going to take it as some joke. And Chaya Raichik, Libs of TikTok on Twitter, is posting misleading pictures of people like Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, with their arm extended out. And it's very clear that these are misleading because when you go and watch the videos, it's just them using their hands to speak. It's been really disgusting to see what the response to this has been. And what I do think we need to keep in mind is that the entirety of Donald Trump's whole shtick, the whole Republican Party, is to continue to push and see what they can get away with. And right now, they are essentially getting away with a Nazi salute live on television because their own side is not calling them out on it. As the opposition, we cannot let this be forgotten. You cannot just let this fade off into the night as if it didn't happen. They're going to continue to push and push and push until there's no resistance at all. And also, we all saw it with our own eyes, and the way that they're trying to literally rewrite reality in real time is crazy to watch. And now that that's out in the open, let's get started on these executive orders. So first and foremost, I know in my first episode, I said that TikTok was going to be banned. Surprise, it wasn't. Donald Trump signed an executive order reversing the ban and giving a 75-day extension for the company to address these quote-unquote national security concerns and sell to a U.S. company. Fortunately, I think this whole law was gone about so wrong to begin with. They just kept yelling about national security concerns, but then nobody was getting in front of a camera or doing an interview and saying what those national security concerns are, which made it really hard for the American people to digest. You can't just say China bad and everybody's going to follow your lead. But all this extension really reads like to me is that there's some sort of Elon and Zuckerberg sort of collusion happening. It doesn't look very promising. People were saying that after TikTok came back, it was different after the ban. I can't speak to that because I felt like mine was pretty much the same or had no noticeable difference. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. It is a little odd because he could have given up to a 90-day extension and he only gave a 75-day one. So I'm curious as to what that's all about. Donald Trump also left the World Health Organization. The U.S. officially withdrew from the World Health Organization on Monday, just hours after his inauguration, citing criticisms of the organization's handling of global health. Donald Trump thinks they're just stealing money from us and doing all the bad things possible. But the issue with this is that this now makes us one of very few countries not involved in the World Health Organization. This move could weaken international health cooperation, leave gaps in pandemic response efforts. The WHO is also how we communicate with other countries and public health agencies when there's an outbreak of anything. So even if there's a big outbreak of measles somewhere in the world, those countries, it doesn't seem like will be able to communicate with us and explain like what they're doing to mitigate the said measles outbreak. It's also how we share research on diseases, and it's safe to assume, in my opinion, that this will set us back, but by how much, I'm not exactly sure. The World Health Organization really was not politicized until COVID. It's a good organization to be in, and to isolate ourselves from it could be absolutely detrimental to public health. On top of this, the administration ordered a complete external communications blackout for all of our health agencies. That's suspicious. Alarming, dare I say. I'm not really sure what the big concern is that he's so worried about these external communications, especially because a lot of his followers refuse to even listen to public health experts. So really kind of bewildered by that one. Another thing that Donald Trump did was reverse about 78 of Joe Biden's executive orders. One of these was canceling a drug price reduction for those on Medicare and Medicaid. This one was funny to me because it's one of the few actions that he signed behind closed doors. If you were watching the news on Monday, he was all over the cameras, signing everything in front of a camera and narrating it the whole time, saying, oh, this is a good one, talking about the money that's going to be saved. But one of the few actions that he signed with no cameras there was the one that got rid of lowering the price of drugs for Medicare and Medicaid users, which is just super dishonest. And I think that's something that's totally going to fly under the radar. And then all of a sudden, people's drug prices are going to go up and they're going to go, hold on, wait a minute. This might be one of those F around and find out situations, but I guess we'll see. Another big one that he did was try to put an end to birthright citizenship. This controversial action eliminated automatic citizenship for children born in the U.S. to non-citizen parents, which was done in complete opposition to the 14th Amendment, which says, in part, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. This action clearly goes against the way the 14th Amendment is phrased and also how it has been interpreted for hundreds of years. The action also notes that children born to illegal immigrants or those that are here on temporary visas, such as student visas, will not be granted citizenship. This, to me, was clearly a grab at potential legal challenges in the hopes that it will make it to the Supreme Court. And I think that Donald Trump thinks that the court will uphold this messed up view of what the 14th Amendment says. At this point, it's hard to say what the court will do because they've done some pretty messed up stuff in the last few years. So I think only time will be able to tell whether this executive order, stays in place. Although I also wouldn't be surprised if the court looked us in the eyes and said, actually, there's 250 years of precedent or however long it's been. We were just kidding. It actually means this. The ACLU has already gone after this action, and while it should be a slam dunk, it's just not so clear now where they're going to fall. Most notably, someone mentioned that this amendment would apply to Kamala Harris, whose parents were both here on temporary visas when she was born. I just think this is wrong. It goes against who we are as a nation and how we were founded as a country, and I do understand that having an anchor baby is a problem, but we do have things in place to try and prevent things like that. When people come into the country, if you look pregnant, they're going to give you extra questions to try and figure out if you are trying to come here to have an anchor baby. Of course, people can overstay their visas, but then what? Because they're going to have a baby that's a citizen and then have no way to get out themselves. So there's a way to fix the problem that they're trying to address without just canceling the 14th Amendment, and I think they need to explore those other options before they go nuclear and just rip away the 14th Amendment. Another thing Trump did was leave the Paris Climate Agreement. Again, it is not the first time he did this. He did this back in 2017, but by withdrawing from this global pact, the U.S. signals a shift away from international climate commitments, potentially undermining efforts to combat climate change. Additionally, this is giving isolationist. It's giving distancing us from our allies and saying that we're not team players. He did this his first term, so I assume that this is just going to be an issue that ping-pongs back and forth. When we have a Democrat in the presidency, they're just going to rejoin it, and then when a Republican comes back in, they'll just leave it again. There was a time in the recent past where many people were on board from the right and the left that climate change is real and needs to be addressed. And now there's a big rise of just straight up climate denialism. It snowed in Florida last week, and all over conservative Twitter, it was, oh, but global warming is real, right? And there just seems to be this disconnect with the fact that global warming is just a word. And global warming also means extreme cold. It's extreme highs and extreme lows and extreme hurricanes and weather events. And so I think there's a big disconnect with that. But also it should be noted that snow in Florida is not normal. Trump did note that instead of joining a global agreement, quote, the United States' successful track record of advancing both economic and environmental objectives should be a model for other countries. So we're not exactly leaders on having fantastic strategies to combat climate change. So I'm not really sure what he's thinking about, because nobody should and nobody has ever looked to us as the leaders of the fixing climate change thing. I think it's so important for him and everybody he's surrounding himself to acknowledge that climate change is real. It is hurting us. And simply pretending that it doesn't exist doesn't do anything to benefit us. You're just pushing the problem further down the line, where someone else is going to have to come in and pick up even more of a mess. Another one that I found particularly quirky, perhaps a little bit funny, was the executive order claiming to restore the freedom of speech. The action was framed as restoring freedom of speech on social media and reducing censorship. However, there is not a lot of clear details, which has left a lot of people questioning what it really means and whether it's addressing a genuine issue. It's also funny because Elon Musk keeps boosting himself and other right-wing accounts on Twitter. So obviously this is not targeted at him because, they're besties and I guess have offices right next to each other. But also Zuckerberg is in Trump's pocket too, so I'm really confused on who this is even meant to target. I really think this was more of like a signal to his supporters that he's the free speech king. But I also do think that this is something that may backfire. I think there will be some sort of instance in the next 4 years where Trump tries to silence dissenters. I just don't think that he can handle criticism, which means that he's going to try to, como se dice, censor people. I don't see this one holding strong over the next 4 years. Another one he signed was a federal hiring freeze. This could strain government agencies, reducing their ability to provide essential services and operate effectively. This did happen the last time he was president, although I think the first time maybe it wasn't explicitly put like in an executive action. Somebody fact check that for me. Anyways, the first administration, whether through an executive action or not, they basically paused or limited hiring, and it created brain drain as higher-ups left, and then there was no one to replace them. It did cause agencies to suffer a lot, and that suffering went on through the Biden years. As they tried to find replacements, it was an incredibly slow recovery, and it honestly still has not been completely resolved. This ends up doing nothing but harming us and threatens our safety when we don't have qualified people in the federal government, and if we're going to have another instance of that brain drain, it's going to be a very, very long road to recovery for federal agencies. Another one Trump signed on Inauguration Day was revoking security clearances. He revoked security clearances for certain individuals, which mostly included those intelligence officials who signed a letter saying that the Hunter Biden laptop story bore the markings of Russian propaganda and misinformation. And in addition to those people, he threw in John Bolton, who was his previous national security advisor. This move is raising concerns about its use as a political tool and its implications for national security. It's super politically motivated. It feels super bitter. And the funny thing is, while it's not 100% sure how many of them still have active clearances, some reports say as few as 8 still do. This seems like a message, once again, to rile up his base that doesn't really understand how security clearances work. It's just a little bit of a bizarre move, and going off of this, he also revoked the security detail of Anthony Fauci, Mike Pompeo, and John Bolton. So John Bolton got the double whammy of no security clearance and no security detail. That's alarming to me as well. It just seems to be putting more people at risk and ruining people's livelihoods in both scenarios. All 3 of those people and a lot of the people that signed that letter stating that it looked like Russian disinformation have credible threats against their lives and their families, and it just doesn't seem to be doing anybody good except for riling up his base, because I can already tell you that if you got on conservative Twitter right now, they are probably whooping it up that these people get to suffer because of Trump's actions. One last one, the executive order on expanding the death penalty. The executive order states that, quote, capital punishment is an essential tool for deterring and punishing those who would commit the most heinous crimes and acts of lethal violence against American citizens. It goes on to encourage the expansion of the death penalty and urges governors to go ahead with execution. He also railed on Biden in this executive order for commuting 37 out of 40 death sentences to life in prison. He specifically wants to expand the death penalty in cases such as the murder of law enforcement officers or a capital crime committed by an alien illegally present in this country. That's a direct quote. Weird, considering the Fraternal Order of Police just turned against him for pardoning all those January 6th crazies. Also, there are tons more crimes that you could be enforcing the death penalty for, and the fact that he's choosing illegal immigration and police is, I guess, not surprising, but, there are other pressing issues at hand, my guy. It marks a return to a more punitive justice system, and it makes me worried for cases that the justice system gets wrong. And for the future of the justice system, I think the death penalty is a very gray area for a lot of people. A lot of people will put conditions on the way they think about the death penalty, like saying, yes, I agree, but, or no, I don't agree, but. So I think having this hard line of a stance is a little unusual for a president, especially given the way I think a lot of people think about the death penalty. There still, in my opinion, needs to be humanity in the justice system, and this take on the death penalty seems to just erase the humanity out of it. And I understand that there are horrible people that get the death penalty, but all you have to do is look into recent history to see how many times the justice system has gotten it wrong. And at the end of the day, I, as a citizen, am not willing to risk killing an innocent person just to get the rest of the bad people for sure killed dead. There was a lot more that he did, such as basically reinstating his Muslim ban from 2017, declaring a national emergency at the border, and changing the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and also Mount Denali back to Mount McKinley. Monday was really just a firestorm of news. I do encourage everyone to go read up on these orders, especially the ones of Biden's that Donald Trump revoked, which included the lowering drug prices. Monday was just so exhausting to experience, and it's depressing to think that this is just the reality for the next 4 years. If you have news alerts turned onto your phone, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It feels like a new one comes up every 5 minutes about some crazy thing that Trump is doing, and I think I just forgot how just unhinged everything is. And unfortunately, in these first few days, a lot of the news alerts have been very vital and very important because they've been some pretty drastic changes. And I know that the news can be heavy. I know it can be hard to interpret and hard to navigate in a way that keeps you sane. But I do think it's important for everybody to read up and understand what these orders are, because this is laying the groundwork for what's to come in the next 4 years. All of these actions reflect a bold and, in a lot of the cases, very divisive agenda with the potential to reshape key areas of policy, both domestic and foreign. It also leaves a lot of unanswered questions about their long-term impacts on both the U.S. and the world. It is important that you stay informed, that you understand what these actions are, and you are able to talk about them in a way that's constructive. Talk about why these orders are harmful or perhaps helpful in certain ways, and be ready to have a conversation about what this administration is doing and how to fix it. That is all I have for you today. If you enjoyed today's episode, I know that I certainly didn't, but don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with somebody who could use this information. As always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and remember to keep moving forward. See you next week, for real this time, when we talk about the economy.